it possible for you to be here. I'm going to begin tonight with a performance. If my hands were anything other than hands, if my hands were anything other than hands, if my hands were anything other than hands, they would be two shooting stars galloping light across the galaxy. They would be a twin fandango of diamond-studded fingerprints hopscotching a radiant neon merengue of light from each folded velvet edge of midnight into every tiny galaxy of 14-karat suns. Our shooting star hands could reach and leap and turn the faces of every burning celestial pedestrian star raised and gazing, bright-eyed, amazed, and awestruck as my shooting star hands whipped by in a flurry of pirouettes, spitting sparks and spilling light, like each finger is a silver big flip lighter, flicking flames of hope into the open faces of those twinkling pale and incandescent sisters whose tears glisten and litter the blistering avenue like sequins. I say now, can you see it? How my shooting star hands would wow and bow and reach them right out of their everyday orbits, turn their glowing dashboard Virgin Mary faces into an illuminated orchestra of rubies and gladiolas right before your very eyes. If my hands were anything other than hands, they would be a street corner jazz quintet. They would be a 10-fingered symphony of saxophones, trombones, clarinets, and trumpets, wailing, rowdy, loud, and proud. Right out from under my fingernails, the song would swell, and it would ring. It would swing itself from the lampposts and reach right into people's houses and bring mothers and sons come to dance in the middle of the street with fathers and daughters, and perhaps, if my hands were a big bad jazz band, there would be no vicious, evil, cruel, or stomping deaths on the avenue, because I would send my fingers flying in a furious hurricane of 8 notes to just slap right into the faces of any slick-tongued, gun-toting mamma jamma who would come to steal my brother's breath. We would be all song and dance and celebration, just the way we are supposed to. If my hands were anything other than hands, they would be 2 magic wands. They'd be 10 abracadabra fingers for me to bring back every bebop, biscuit baking grandmother that we ever lost, every sweet and remarkable friend that we didn't realize was either sweet or remarkable until death stole them from under our breath while we were looking over our shoulder at the bus stop, and then all of a sudden they were gone. And for a moment, just a moment, if my hands were magic wands, I would bring them back. And for a moment, we could make eye contact. And we could wrap our arms around each other and give up all the good human things that perhaps we hadn't had a chance to give. And maybe then a goodbye. And for just a moment, we could have them. We could hold them. We could wrap our arms around them. And in that moment, we could start the beginning of something good. Something so much better than ever before. If my hands were magic wands, if my hands were anything other than hands, they would be an entire conversation of miracles for me to cure you of any cancer that ever ailed you. They would be a conjure woman's cupboard of spells and incantations, and I would be able to reach right through your breastbone to ease your heartache. If my hands were anything other than hands, as immutably remarkable as you were made, and you would see that you have no need to hate yourself or anyone else to death ever again. If my hands were anything other than hands, they would be 2 turntables and a microphone. But mostly, if my hands were anything other than hands, they would be 2 shooting stars galloping light across the galaxy. Thanks.
With this. What does it say?
Believe in the power of art.
Who here believes that? If you believe it, then I want you to say it again. If you don't believe it, don't have to say it. So I'm just going to let you make that decision right now. Take a couple seconds to decide.
I believe in the power of art.
I believe more people said that. I believe in the power of art. I believe in the power of art, and I believe in the power of love, and I do not distinguish between the two of them. I'll use them interchangeably. I feel like I am a very fortunate human being to have, one, survived to the age that I am, but also to have had the greatest life and death reckoning of my life, to have had that as a young person. And for me, that reckoning is holding the space of understanding what the highest stakes of my existence are. So the highest stakes of my existence, that which hinges the place of life and death for me, is art. Art. I believe in the power of art, and I believe in the power of love, and I do not always distinguish between the two of them. And everything that I say from this point forward in our talk together all leads back to this understanding, all leads back to this belief. And the word believe in this phrase can really be grounded within your body in the same place that your lungs are. It's in the critical place of bringing breath and bringing life and bringing body nourishing sustainability. So that word believe is as they are the lungs. That faith is the lungs of my life. Cool, we're going to move forward? All right. This is the cycle of my life. 'Tis the cycle of my cycle of life. That's never happened before. I do want to let you know that it just now occurred to me that I could turn part of the Lion King into a very interesting moment in an artist talk. Cycle, living cycle. How do I sustain both my body, my heart, my mind, my soul through love? I believe in the power of love. I love the definition that Dr. King uses in the Love Your Enemies speech. Love is the creative, understanding, redemptive, transformative goodwill. I love how Bell Hooks writes about love and talks about deep intentionality, talks about making choices, talk about moving forth with this decision in your body, in your heart, and in your mind. But also, one of the things that Bell Hooks does when she talks about love, she talks about how hard it is. Talks about how she doesn't teach much anymore because it requires so much love. But the love requires fuel. The love requires energy to go forth from your mind and from your body and from your imagination. And so what's energizing my love is where I live. Where I live. I live in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh called Homewood. I grew up in LA in the 1980s. So I grew up in a time when like hip hop transitioned to gangster rap, when I grew up with like NWA and Public Enemy coming up. I grew up knowing who Eazy-E was because I went to school in Compton. I went to Figueroa Elementary School. I remember Eazy-E's street cred. which was like a trip to see the movie. I was like, yo, they are really painting this kid to be like a prince. But I remember that was scary when I was coming up. But when I was coming up in Los Angeles, also is a time when there's a lot of guns on the street, a lot of street death. The word drive-by shooting became a thing. Walk-by shooting became a thing. I knew what an AK-47 was when I was very young. And so it surprised me to make it out of LA, because a lot of young people didn't make it out of LA. One, because I also grew up in the time when AIDS became a thing. Y'all remember that? Like those articles first, some of you remember in the 80s, the gay flu. This thing is happening. I remember when I was a kid, we had to do book reports. And I would report on this, and then little by little, it became HIV/AIDS. It became we became this understanding. So where I live and being alive, one, because I thought I was going to die as a young person. But it was surprising to make it out of LA, then move to Pennsylvania, and be in this little place in Pennsylvania called Homewood, and find out that there was an equal amount of street death still happening. They were surprising. There's one weekend in Homewood. I live in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh called Homewood. Like statistically, 2010, 2011, 2012, Homewood was FBI crime stats, one of the most dangerous places in America for black people to be killed by other black people. It's a neighborhood that is a square mile. Rachel Maddow show did two entire episodes in Homewood called Homewood, America's Most Violent Neighborhood. I thought she could have come up with a more creative title, but you know what? So where I live, helping to feed and nourish the love and be the love, and my work, sculpture work, but also it's in a cycle because the work is love. The life decision has been love. That's what it is. And then that love, if it is love, then it must be active with all of your breath in all of the places that you go. This isn't project love. This isn't I'm not talking about love just when you feel good. I'm talking about deep, disruptive love. Love that wants to show up and disrupt cycles of cruelty, brutality, ugliness, the kind of ugliness that is systemic and structural. At the center of my cycle is art. That's the way that I know how to love. That's how I know how to be in the world. That's how I know myself. That's how I have survived anything, is because as a kid, my mother made us make things. That was how we grew up. She would just put a whole bunch of stuff all over the dining room table. Because I grew up in LA in the 80s, so we were playing on the street. It wasn't safe. So she would always say, here, write a book, make a play, make a story, do anything, but we stayed in the house. I had neighbors who did not know who we were. They lived next door to us 13, 14 years. Art is the center of the cycle. So when I'm creating in my studio, when I'm downstairs in my studio, those of you who are artists who have a solo practice as opposed to a communal practice where you're at a print shop or you're glass blowers, because you need a team to do those things. But you have experienced that thing. Even writers experience the thing where you are steeped in your material, in a space that you created to create. And you get into that miraculously generative space of accessing your ideas and your imagination, and they're coming through your body, and time shifts. That time shift and that environment in my studio I recognize as love itself. So everything that I do in that space, the way that I breathe in that space, any thought that is in my mind, any concern or issue of my heart or my body is tended to, is reckoned with in a space where I'm making all of these creative decisions. And that for me is love. Love is generative, creative, understanding, redemptive. So there are those moments of creative redemption, where what color, what thing next, and the failure and the despair of having moments in the studio where it just can be so hard to move forward, and there are these redemptive creative moments there also. Love. Being alive where I live. All of this is the work. This is my front porch in Homewood. This power figure is in the Progressive collection. Progressive Insurance, those of you who do know or who don't know, has one of the largest and one of the collections of most depth of contemporary art. It's the largest corporate contemporary art collection in the country. This figure is there. That place where this figure lives in their corporate offices is like a museum. These people, when you call Center Progressive, you're basically calling this amazing museum where people work. No, really, and they bring artists in to do residencies and installations. You can flip through a book at Progressive of works of art and decide what you want to be in your office. And art handlers will bring it to you. And so you can have it there for 3 months or for 6 months, and you can do that. It's amazing. It was amazing when I was there. This is called Power Figure to Keep Me Alive. This figure was a turning point for me because before I made this figure, I was contemplating my last suicide attempt, which would be after my final. I had a couple before. One that was very serious that helped to keep me alive for a long time, the reckoning after that suicide attempt. Not attempts that were like, oh, I wasn't going to find me and feel bad, and then I had this dramatic moment, or like the cry for help, but total non-existence anymore. And so before I worked on this figure, I had come to a place where I realized that one need not ingest a whole bunch of pills to die. One need not walk out in front of traffic, hang themselves, or shoot themselves in the head. One could will oneself to death. I had this understanding before I made this piece. I figured I could just sit in a chair and die if I wanted to, and I felt that. I felt that it was a true thing. But throughout my life, people always said things like, their art's so powerful. Love is powerful. And I was like, what do they mean by power? I don't understand what it means when you say that this act of like making this thing I've done my whole life is powerful. What does that mean? What is that power? Can it drive my car? Can it feed me? What is it? So I started having this conversation with that idea that art is powerful. And one of the things that inside of that journey that I did was I had not had a lot of dolls when I was growing up. And I loved dolls. For some reason, I would always touch them. I would always pick them up, take them apart, and try to figure out really what was happening in this like miniature human representation and why I was so attracted to it. And so, but I always felt bad that as somebody that started to call myself an artist, that I really was so interested in dolls. And I was like, well, is that craft? Is that, do I just go to like little summer art festivals? What is happening? What I did when I decided to scientifically investigate for myself what the power of art was is that I every day would go down into my basement studio in a row house in Homewood, and I would only allow myself to do, to touch, to move, or to make with materials that I felt deeply. I trusted my instincts. And I gave myself permission to not know what the end outcome was going to be. So I wasn't working like an engineer or an architect. I was moving incrementally, instinctively, with as much innate human prowess as I could muster up for myself. Which meant when I would walk my dogs, I would always take a bag with me because I was always picking stuff up off the ground. I was picking up bottle caps, I was picking up keys, I was picking up bullet shells, I was picking up nails, I was picking up, there's so many vacant houses in my neighborhood. I was going into vacant houses and I was, just allowing my hands and my imagination and my mind to be activated by what I saw. And I trained myself through doing this over and over again to recognize my own system's frequency of what yes feels like. So I didn't always know what I was going to do with the material that I was bringing home, but I knew that it would cause me despair if I didn't have it. I knew that I would experience regret if I thought, man, I should have picked that up. Man, I should have got that. I just said, it's a yes thing. I will bring it home. And I trained would bring those materials into my studio, and what started to happen when I stopped being afraid of what I was hearing externally about what artists were and how artists work and what artists produce and what an artist's practice looked like. When I stopped thinking about those things and allowed myself to do what myself needed to do, I started to just stack things. I started with this obsessive stacking of objects. So around my studios, you would see stacks of wood, toys, heads, stacks of wood, toys, heads, bottles. And I just allowed myself to move with the material. And I created 6 power figures, the first one of which came forth was Power Figure to Keep Me Alive. And I called it Power Figure to Keep Me Alive because that's where I learned the lesson that what's happening when you go to that space. There's a name for it. One of my friends, Louis Fox, who started Free Range Graphics, which is now Free Range Studios in the Bay Area, is doing this film called Kamiwaza. And it's about people, artists, athletes, dancers, musicians, who find that perfected place of mind, body, imagination, and heart. So that would happen to me when I was in my studio. And I could tell it was happening because time would slip. I'd be in the studio 18 hours. Like no time had passed. Only I would have this accumulation of objects and of work after that time. And so what I decided after this figure was that I needed to organize my life. That if I was going to stay alive, because I'm a very sensitive person, and if I wanted to stay alive in this world, that I needed to find and organize my life in a way that gave me as much time as possible to be in the studio, as much time as possible to create. So I changed the way I live. I stopped working for other people. That was a big thing. And I lived in an environment that allowed me to lower my overhead as much as possible, so that I wasn't putting out so much money to pay rent and to pay my bills, and that way I didn't have to spend so much time working for somebody else to sustain my living. So in my neighborhood in Homewood, one of the things that also caught me, and one of the things that we're seeing right now in all these slides is the elements of the cycle: love, living, being alive, where I live, and the work, and the center of art. So all of this stuff are ingredients that make up the body of that. There's a hidden graffiti field in Homewood. It was an old garage and the roof collapsed, but it still has the walls. And the guy who owns it lets all these graffiti muralists come in and fill the space so that the police don't arrest them. So one of the things that really surprised me is how little public, visual grief or notice there is when there is street death. There's so much street death. So like literally people dying, being shot and killed and dying on the street. I was like, I would be walking around and be like, man, somebody got killed here on Thursday. But it's just the ground. You don't see it and nobody's saying anything. It's sort of like, that's what happens. People die. That's how black people die. That's how black people die. They get shot and killed. Just keep walking on. But this thing was like this shrug. It was like this sort of, it was all this silence, this internalized dismissal of these enormous happenings. It was a big deal to me that, at the time I was a teaching artist and I had students who were so grief-stricken. I had one student, I won't say her name, but her brother had been killed like a summer before, just sitting on the steps. And the grief of it totally transformed her. She was a different person. I didn't know what I was talking about. There wasn't like this net. There wasn't this thing to catch her. There was just like, as I did, you absorb all of this grief, all of this trauma. So I started making these figures and images to physicalize what was happening, because it would disappear so quickly. And there's the trauma of the violence happening,
But then what was also began to traumatize me was the silence after it. The idea that as a human being, I shouldn't care. And that it should weigh less inside of me. And that strength in this situation means that I don't cry about it, and that I don't speak about it, and that I don't try to have conversations about it with somebody else. And that was difficult for me. One, because I'm around kids so much, and kids will be like, Miss Vanessa, that's where he died. That's his blood stains. Everybody on the street wants to kill us. Can we go back in? We're going to kill all these black, are going to kill us. Like literally having kids being like, we're just not safe. And nobody reaching in, right? So I started making these images, and I started sharing them and doing it also inside of sculpture to physicalize, to peep in the public memory of what is happening. One of the things that I do with, sometimes with smaller works is I finish them and I take them out onto the street, and I take them onto the bus, and I talk to people, and my writer sit them on the bus next to me and let people ask me questions about them, because they're power figures, and I make them to do real things in the world today. So I take them outside, and I move them around, and sometimes my friends photograph my street corners. This is an image called Done with the Wind, and I feel like the best artist talks sort of just happen out of the world with people who may or may not be used to looking at objects and things. This is a house across the street from where I used to live in Homewood. I moved down the street. This house where Billy Strayhorn took piano lessons. They smashed the piano with a sledgehammer and pulled it out with a crane through the hole that they broke in the roof. This happens a lot in my neighborhood. Pittsburgh has lost more than half of its population since the steel mills are up. It's really hard to watch all those houses disappear, but I always mine them for materials. There's parts of old houses in all of my sculptures. A lot of the wood that these are built on are from these old Victorian houses, or from these homes where people lived and loved and raised their kids, and I believe that the air of that is still present. But also, there's not a lot of ownership in my neighborhood, so to see homes being destroyed and rental properties where there isn't that deep connection. I see a lot of urban migration. A lot of people just move 6 blocks away, 3 blocks away, 1 block up, 1 block over, and there's just all this migration around. Keys scraped up off the street, outside of the base hands in my studio. Whenever you see keys in my work, they mean forgiveness. Internal forgiveness, external forgiveness. This is a photo of my neighborhood, the neighborhood that I live in the 30s, that was sold to me. It was sold to me for $2 in this photo album with a whole bunch of images of black people in Pittsburgh from like 1890 to the 1950s, which was spectacular and so beautiful. I call myself a citizen artist because I feel like one of the things that I'm striving to do as a human being as dimensionally human as I can be, is to inhabit. My favorite part of the definition of citizen is inhabitant. So I think about inhabiting all of these dimensions of my humanity with as much courage and as much love as I'm able to. Being in America, inhabitant of a city town, especially one entitled to the rights and privileges of a free woman, it's especially resonant because for so much of American, legal, literally documented legally, black people, African Americans, were not human. We were not as whole or as human as as men, as white people. So to totally, as courageously inhabit my human citizenship. And since art is the center of my cycle, I'm a citizen artist. This is my front porch, again, in Homewood. That's where letters were. That slate that you see there, I collected from the house that was demolished up the street. I would make sculptures on my front porch, and kids would watch me. There's a bus stop in front of my house, and kids would wait for the bus or get off the bus, and they would watch me working, and they would ask a series of questions. And they would hang out at my fence, and they would stalk back and forth and be like, "Why are you so dirty?"
because I'd be wearing my art clothes, and I was also never really concerned with like looking flashy or looking too fly because I would work. Well, why are you so dirty? What are you doing? So I'm an artist. I'm making art. Can I help you? No. I tell kids no because I'm gay, and they had come. Somebody's grandmother told some of the kids, Miss Vanessa doesn't go to church, and Miss Michelle is not her sister and is not her cousin. And it was like explicit. Kids came to the fence and were like, my grandmother said, Miss Michelle is not your sister, not your cousin, and you don't go to church. Who's Miss Michelle? And it's funny because some of the other kids would just start answering for me. They'd be like, that's her family, right? That's her family. And I found out later it's because their mothers were partners and they had been taught to say, we're family. And so other kids would be like, that's family, stop asking. And so I would tell kids no because I was like, wow, if there's sort of conversation that I'm not living with my sister or my cousin, then I don't want anybody to be concerned that like I'm like grooming kids to come into my yard and be like, yes, small child, make art here. Because I think that's one of the things people are scared about gay folks. You gonna leak your gay on me? Especially I think as an act of civil disobedience, I'm just gonna start using whatever bathroom I want to all the time. Just all the time. I'll be like, should I choose the urinal? Or not? Choices, choices, choices. We should all start doing it. That's our act of protest, always just showing up to the bathroom like, what should I do in here right now? Like, be not afraid, people. And then when other afraid people try to convince you to be afraid with them, no. Tell them no. So you don't have to be afraid, Mr. Trump. It's okay. It's going to do everything. Everything's going to be okay, Hillary. Fear not, people in North Carolina. Fear not, Mississippians. Fear not. Shh, calm down. Shh. Don't be scared. We just need to start helping each other to not be so afraid and then legislate our fear, right? Let's do that. Oh, so, porch kids, no, you cannot come into my yard. And this child here, this little girl swung on my fence. Oh, hi, Miss Vanessa, I'm just visiting swimming, and she swung herself into my front yard. And she was like, oh, Miss Vanessa, I landed by this paintbrush. And I was like, I see what you're doing. So I pulled out, my girlfriend at the time was a scene designer. I pulled out all the old scene tape that she had, and I'd be like, here, go ahead. You can't help me. I tried to let kids help me physically making the sculptures, but what happened is would work with so many materials, and there was a facility that I had that was not instantly teachable in these moments. So I said, here, you can make your own art. When I said, here, you can make your own art, there was this stupefying moment where kids would just look at me and be like, well, what am I supposed to make? I was like, this isn't a supposed to situation. You wanted it, you had it, right? What do I do? I was like, well, you need to make a decision. Start with your favorite color. Okay, well, then what do I do next? What do I make? And I was like, well, what do you need to make? Do you need to make something for school? Do you want to communicate something to someone? You need to make a decision. And then you need to either have a purpose or give yourself permission to just have an experience. Because I'm at work, and then I have to always explain, this is work for me, I'm working, this is what pays the bills, this is work. So what happened is kids would come to my porch, they'd see their friends get off the bus, I'd be working on sculptures on my porch because the ceiling in the basement is too low for the height and the breadth that my sculptures were getting to. So I'd work on the porch and just pull sculptures back into the front of my house. And I did this consistently. So kids would watch and adults would watch. Adults would watch as they stood at the bus stop, but adults would always say, that looks scary. That's so scary. Is that voodoo? Is that voodoo? Somebody was like, you don't believe in God? And I was like, how is that your response? Funny to me. But kids would be like, can I help? Can I do it? Can I do it? And so I started like giving them old t-shirts, and little kids got this like, "Would you go home and bring a smock?" And they'd come back and their friends would be there, be like, "Okay, we're making art, don't bother this Vanessa, she's at work." And then they would say, the friends would be, if it was a new kid, the new kid would be like, "Well, what am I supposed to make?" And their friend would look at him and be like, "You need to make a decision. You need to make a decision, choose a color." And then I saw that happen, and I realized, I was like, oh, the same thing that happens to me when I'm in my studio, you know, what's happening with them. Like, I don't have to repeat this message, because now the message is alive. The reality that you can make a decision and be creative and have an experience is just alive inside of them, and they're going to move it forward, and I can actually go to work. And there would be these moments where it'd be an afternoon, pull out all the paint, people started dropping off house paint at the house, people, you know, put stuff on the front porch. Right here you see watermelon, because I would get a snack and kids would be like, "Where's my snack?" And I'd be like, "Okay, yes, that's happening now too, I'm feeding people, but all right, because I love food." And there would be sometimes kids would be so hungry, they just come and eat. And I'd be like, "Yo, as far as I'm concerned, there's more than enough food. Eat and be happy." I used to be hungry as a kid, and it's hard being hungry. It can be so painful. And so I'd be like, "Yep, food, we ordering pizza." One mother at the art house came, and I heard her whisper to her friend, "Sometimes I just come to eat. I just come to get the kids get something to eat." You know what I'm saying? I like the art and everything, but it really helps me, you know. And I heard her say that under her breath. And I was like, food can be so easy. So I ordered all this pizza. And then sometimes I order extra pizza and I walk down the street as I'm walking home from the art house. And I'll stop, people get on their porches, and I'll stop and be like, "You want a pizza?" And so we like just share pizza up the street. But food is important. That nourishment is important. Kids would come, they're inviting their friends, people dropping off stuff on my front porch, driving by my house, stopping, and they'd be like, "Is this a daycare?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I look like I have a daycare." I'm like, I don't really even like kids. I just treat these people, these children here, like they are adults. That's why they're making their own decisions right now. But I'm not changing diapers. Don't ask me to take care of your child, just on factory. Anyway, you understand. So sometimes we'd be out here and it would rain. Kids would be like, "Why is it raining on our art?" I'm like, "Because we're outside." And there was a crisis at this house. I got crisis custody of the kids because after all the hours of the emergency room waiting for next kid to come in, me and my girlfriend were the only people who could say no to the question, "Have you ever been in handcuffs?" Because the social worker would ask anybody who came to get custody of the kids, "Have you ever been in handcuffs?" Because if you had, for any reason, you couldn't get crisis custody of the kids because no judge could waive the criminal record, even if it was a record, if it was old, whatever. So we get kids. I go home from the hospital with children that I basically have foster crisis care custody of. And the house that everybody got put out of, I called the company and asked if we could use it as an art house. Just moving past the whole, it's raining all over everything. I'm always pulling snacks out of the house. I actually don't have running water in my front yard, so I'm filling buckets up with soapy water. And some kids just enjoy the soapy water, and they're like cleaning the sidewalk because it's fun for them. And so I asked if we could use a house, and she said, "No, that's a HUD house. You can't use it. There's a waiting list, all this stuff." And she told me no on a Friday, called me back on Monday, and said she couldn't stop thinking about it. So she says we could use the house for like 4 months. She would sneak and let us use it. 2.5 years later, we still had it. And I felt like that was a major act of living courage on her part, because when I asked her if we could use the house, she told me 8 reasons why we couldn't use it. I ticked them off, and I was like, "Oh, I don't think this is going to happen," because she knows every single HUD rule and reason why we can't use it. And every month when they would have that board meeting, and they would be like, "Okay, so 7743, what are we going to do?" She's like, she's going to still use it. So every month she reasserted our permission. Every month she met that group with the same courage. She's like, "They're there, they're going to keep using it." You know, and she never made a stop until I said, "I'm going to buy a house." And being at the art house, I came to understand how important the spectacle of joy is in a place where, I would tell people that I lived in Homewood and Pittsburgh, and they'd be like, ouch, why do you live there? I have these students when I was teaching artists who would write poems just about getting out of Homewood. And they would think that their lives would be drastically different if they could live in another place. And that there wasn't opportunity, that there wasn't safety, there wasn't love or care. I remember a kid said to me, I have a poem where I say, the kids in my neighborhood want to know why I live in my neighborhood. They see me on the street after school and they do double takes. They say, Miss Vanessa, why do you live in Homewood? We all thought that you would live in a neighborhood where people sound the way you sound when you speak. Somebody said that to me. See, we just imagine that you didn't live here because you're not here. Like, that's it. And I was like, well, what's happening here? They were like, it's a bad neighborhood. There's guns, and there's drugs, and there's prostitution, even on Sundays. Nothing around here is pretty. Nobody cares. And I said, what about us? We are pretty, and we live here. And bad isn't determined by where you live. It's determined by what you do. It's by your action, not your address. So I had all these young people who had these ideas about where they live and getting out of where they live. But one of the things, I don't know if any of you heard that report this weekend about life expectancy and poverty, right? So the kids are on point. Kids were right. Their lives would be different. But that's not on them as kids, it's on us as people with human commitment and political will and vision to change the place, to make the place different, as opposed to them thinking that you go wherever you want to go, but it's not the idea that lives inside of you that, because one of the things that it started to crystallize for me is I had kids who felt like they were worthless. It was meeting young people who would write these poems, and what they were saying is, I'm so worthless, I'm so much nothing, I'm so much ugly, I'm so much kicked to the curb. And they were connecting that relationship with where they lived. And so the spectacle of making art in public in a place where people either look at you only based on their perception of what you need from them, as opposed to your wealth and abundance as a human being, right? So the spectacle of art making, the spectacle of joy, and the spectacle of love, and the spectacle of beauty as a disruptive force to hate, as a disruptive force to violence. 2 days before this, 2 people were shot and killed at the top of the street, which was weird. It was weird to, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, somebody got killed, and then 3:30, somebody else gets killed. And it was the first time I heard one of my neighbors say that they were afraid to come outside. And I thought, oh, that's how it happens. That's how isolation happens. That's how we stop talking about things. That's how the connection dies, because people are afraid, and their response to the fear is to not put themselves in the environment where it is. So I did something. I invited all of our 4,000 Facebook friends and let people share it hundreds of times. And we were having what I call a pot love dinner, where you bring something. I'm cooking chicken, Miss Marjorie's making pound cake, and we're going to come make art. Just pull tables out everywhere, onto the sidewalk. And just work. There's a 6-week-old baby in there. That's Teresa goes to NYU now. Over here are this kid is one set of twins of one of my friends who's a Carnegie Mellon professor. So people actually came from everywhere, from the neighborhood, from all around, and it became this disruptive spectacle to the quivering fear. Because it's very difficult to wake up to gunshots. It's very difficult. Street death is it's such a hard thing, because, it's true that they don't cover bodies up. The whole Mike Brown thing, 4 hours, 5 hours, they don't cover this. It's a crime scene. And it's very hard, because somebody knows somebody who got killed, so they're going to call somebody on their cell phone. Somebody's going to run up to the police tape screaming and falling to the ground. And the police see stuff all the time, so they don't care. They're sort of laughing. I was I call it body watching. When somebody dies in the street, you sort of stay and watch the body. You don't just leave it to the police and leave it to passerbyers, because, you know, it was a sacred thing. Like, where my people are from in Africa, there was a way that you treated death, and there was a ritual around it. So we will stay the whole time, otherwise it's the police. But I watched the police exchange porn pics on the inside of the yellow tape. So there's a body on the ground. Somebody's fiance comes driving up the street, and the police are like, you know, and the detective said, don't, you know, it's hard for us too. We got to do whatever we have to do to maintain our own PTSD to go forward. Do not throw your rage at these police officers. So it's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to see. And you can sort of feel it in the street. You sort of, after the Wilkinsburg, that mass shooting in Wilkinsburg like 6 weeks ago, for 2 or 3 days you could feel how slow and sad the street was. Because that happened about like 2 miles away from my house, and you could feel it. And so to be intentionally communal, to make intentional, loving, creative spectacles of your humanity became a profound tool for us to transform our lives, to transform our stories, to transform this place. Prolific little artist, this one little boy, he's like, give me another piece of paper. What do you want? I'm gonna make it. Here you go, Miss Vanessa, I'm on fire. I'm gonna paint you. There it is. And I'll let him do it. I'm like, I want to see what's happening next. So inside of my work also, because what we just saw is a lot of the living work, a lot of work where I live, the living work of love. Like, what does love look like on a daily basis when you got to go to office? Like, what does it look like when you're active lovingly at work? So for me, it looks like that, what we just saw. This is what it looks like sculpturally. You know, so I started making, my work now does not exist as single figures. So there's a single figure here. Right now, my work consists of armies of power figures. The work that's at the Wadsworth, will be at the Wadsworth Athenaeum, is an army of 30 female power figures. So I started making intentional togetherness inside of sculptures. And as you heard earlier, my list of materials include that the things that you see and the things that you cannot see. Love, the shape of togetherness, rage, always rage, sorrow, lots of love, always coming back to the love, because I have to affirm that love for myself every day. I have to affirm my capacity to love. I have to affirm the mystery of love as it exists in a world. I drove around with a taillight out for like 2.5 months, and I didn't go home for Christmas because I was so scared. I think about Sandra Bland sometimes, and I think that woman didn't think she was going to be the one. She was going to go get a new suit. She was excited to go to work, but she was the one. And I thought, so I started looking around me different, and I had this broken taillight. I was like, oh, I have to absorb into my being now that I could be the one. I could be a story. And I think about how Tamir Rice's mom said bye to her kid every day. She said, go out and play. See, she didn't think he was going to be the one. And I think about all the mothers around me who are like, you know, I heard a mother say, every time I say bye to my son now, it's different. Like, she would stand on the porch and be like, and I remember watching, I'm like, why is it always this production when they see this kid off to school? Like, what's happening? You know, even the sisters are like, you know, so I realized that I could be the one. And so that's scary, and it's uncomfortable, and it can enclose around your life. Like, I didn't go home for Christmas because I had a broken taillight. People drive around with broken taillight. People never fix their taillights. And so that fear can close in around you. So my antidote to that is to affirm the love and the humanity, that creative understanding, and also being in the spirit of mystery. That to call police, use this telephone. This isn't a cool collection in DC. I know. They were going to put this in the New York Times. This was going to run in the New York Times and the Sunday Times. But the Friday before, the Saturday before, that young man killed those two police officers. So and I was okay with that. I was like, I'm okay. Another work to physicalize that public memory. Inside of these are lead crystal tears. I had a residency at the Glass Center. Inside of all these vessels are my friend's dreadlocks. We made a glass vessel for every dreadlock because he's a black, gay, male family therapist, and I felt like he was the rarest person that I knew, and that he had gone through all of this research about healing and made his life about healing. And I was like, oh, I want all of that energy and information. So he cut off his locks and we hand glue vessels for all of them. There is no they. I'm almost done. I make these signs that say stop shooting, we love you. I make works of art that look like political yard signs. They look like political signs. I put them out in like primary season and everything, but it sort of jars you because you'll be like, Attorney General, Congressman, and it's just a sign that says love that I will insert in some of them, or some of them just say, you are so beautiful. It'll be like, Attorney General, you're so beautiful. And so I made these like primary season March. They started like several years ago. I was on the porch. There was a shooting at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I literally see school buses coming down the place, and I was like, oh, they should make sure these shootings don't happen. They should make sure this is horrible. They should stop this. And I had this epiphany on the porch. I was like, oh, there's no they. I was like, they don't exist. I always wondered what guy he meant when he said, be the change. I was like, oh, they're not going to do anything because they don't exist. And so I had this idea to make these signs. It was the clearest thing. Sometimes there would be a shooting and I would think, or I would see somebody like, see somebody carrying a gun or like raging and talking about killing somebody, because they'd be like, you stay here, I'm gonna come back with my gun. And that's like actually happened. And so one of my friends has to like train young men. If somebody says they're gonna come back with a gun and kill you, leave. Don't stay. Don't test. So really, he was like, sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's the soft skill that you get yourself out of this environment. And mind you, a lot of things that I'm saying right now, they're just coming transmitted through my own PTSD, which I have to work out through art and creativity. So the clearest was, sometimes I would see something happen, I would think, just don't shoot anybody. Could you stop? Could you just stop shooting people? I mean, we all love you. We know we love you because when you get killed, people come out of the woodworks. And they talk about how you had a hard life and things were so bad, and if only this happened, or if only that happened. But you're not going to be around for that. So could you not shoot anybody? And I just wanted to sort of, and I'm like always had a soft heart. The kids at the art house told me, Miss Vanessa, you'll cry over anything. But I wanted to just say stop, and I make these signs, and then maybe somebody would be like on their way. So like a little while after this happened, somebody shot up a playground and killed an 18-month-old named Marcus. And I thought to myself, wow, what if he had seen a sign and instead of turning left to go to the park, he turned right to go visit his grandma because he knew, like, just a little bit corny, romantic thoughts. But I was like, you know what, whatever. It's worth a try. It's just ink and corrugated plastic. I'm going to make them. And so I made them, took them to the senior citizen center so that they could be the first people to put them in their yard because I was afraid to just be the first person. And once the seniors found out that they were free, they took all of them. And so by the time school got out, they were all in the neighborhood. And there was one in my yard too. And I could see kids getting off the buses saying, no, they're everywhere. I see them from there. I could see this recognition, like on the high school kids as they're getting off. And one kid stopped in my yard, she's like, that's so stupid. Such a waste of plastic and waste of ink. And when I spoke at their school later, I had to explain to them that what it is an idea that I didn't just think about. Because sometimes I say, you have ideas, you think, oh, it would be great to do this, and you don't do it. You think maybe they're going to do it, or somebody else is going to do it. Like, oh, I had this idea to invent a piece of paper with some sticky on the back. And, oh, but you didn't do it, and somebody else did it. You're like, oh, I had, so it's like, have you ever had that feeling? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I don't like that feeling to pass me by. I do not like the regret of wishing that I had done something. So this is idea. It's real. And if it saves somebody's life, then it's worth it. If we don't know, it's still worth it. And you're worth this idea, right? You're worth this idea. And I found out that when I was talking to these high school kids, they didn't think they were worth it. They didn't realize that right? And that their life was worth it. And so the signs, made thousands of signs. I have people send me pictures of signs. Somebody's had a sign made it to Egypt. You know, so it's a very interesting thing. In Detroit, they go around. The new art house is beautiful. So we went from this house that you see here, which is a small row house. I bought a house on the opposite corner, so that's one street corner. The next street corner is the new art house. So our new art house is beautiful. Beautiful matters. I talked about the spectacle of beauty. I talked about being intentional about the coming together and the connection and creativity and beauty and spectacle, people being outside and be loving. The art house is covered in glass mosaic now, and there's a lot of words, times it just says yes. You know, I sometimes will see people at the bus stop looking at the house and they just go, yes. Because they're reading a yes at the house. This is my friends from the Glass Center helping us mosaic, helping us grout, and you know, a lot of kids. This is one of the kids who broke all the windows. I call this crew of young men the window breakers because they busted up all my windows and then started coming back later when they saw everybody working at the house saying, do you have anything for us to do? Can we do anything? I'm like, did you break my windows? And there's one who's so swift and so smart. He looks at me and he goes, no. And I was like, I caught you breaking the windows, dude. So, no, what not? So I was like, okay, we're going to move forward past this place. And so the house is also covered in stars. So this is the house in progress. This is the color I painted the house, which is this ridiculous blue color. My neighbors would come out, they saw the swatch of yellow and blue in the house, they'd be like, the yellow is because of that blue. It just, you can see them coming from the street, they would come out and they'd be like, she don't paint that house that blue color. And we did. And people love it now. They just stand outside the house and say, it's so beautiful. This is the side of the house with about 50 of the stars, but another 50 stars go up on the house. On the other side, some of the front, some more on the back and the side, and people sponsor the stars. I didn't get any grant money. I don't apply for grants anymore because the idea that I would try to sort of like fit my life and work into this RFP started to really bother me, and I thought it was also not sustainable. That I ought to try to find a way to truly sustain that which I do at the scale that it needs to be. And if I try to scale it up and I can't sustain it, then that's a story for me. So people sponsored stars in the names of anybody. There's stars sponsored in the name of dogs. That's the front door. This is the reading room. This is a girl whose name is Peaceful. This is a kid looking at the star he made. As I'm taking this photo of him, he's saying, I can't believe that I did that. This is one of the neighbors from down the street. So many people in the neighborhood worked on the house and they're really proud of it. Sometimes they come and they be like, I did this! Yellow square! Show him my E! That's Mr. Stan. Show him the E! Did you show him my E? I'm like, everybody sees your E! Beauty is constructive force. Yes. This is a photo series that I do called The Blacks, and it was made after I heard that woman on the Diane Ring show just keep talking on and on about the blacks. The blacks do this, the blacks do that, and nobody stopped her. And I was like, well, I get to redefine what the blacks mean. So I did this photo shoot, and I do it as a spectacle where I walk a model around the neighborhood as as a living power figure. And it's so cool because people will get out of their cars and they'll take pictures. Look at this man, look at this kid smile. He's like, I never saw anything like this happen in this neighborhood before. He's like, she's so beautiful. That's what this kid's doing. She's actually filming everything. She's filming everything. She's like, she's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. And she couldn't stop looking at her. This girl had this look on her face when she would look at this model. This girl's name is Essence. She'd be like, you know, she said, Miss Vanessa, she's the most beautiful person I've seen. There's another image from the Black series. Another image. This is Celeste. It's her 70th birthday in this photo. Opera singer Anthony Winfield, the Blacks, with the kids. So I go and I walk through the neighborhood taking pictures all around with this bag of stuff to take stuff on and off the model. Because it's stuff that I made, like that's my fabric, my jewelry, I made that, you know, I made that sign. And the kids will come and be like, I want to be in a picture. So they pick up stuff. The other kids like, we all want to be in a picture. And then they want to be in the picture by themselves. That's us. And Ra here, he wanted to make a crown. And so he took the fabric I used for a bracelet, he was like, crown, crown. And I was like, you got it. You got it. And so I love how infectious it is. I love the infectious excitement of making art around. So this is the Hidden Graffiti build. This is the guy whose house was being demoed at the top of the street, standing at the fence. People would always come and stand at my fence, and we would talk and make things and share stories. And he was a piano prodigy. He still is this amazing pianist, and he loves Chopin. And sometimes I go to the Good Samaritan service to hear him play. It's a service where the homeless people go to. He plays us beautiful, us mighty, us fly, us powerful. This is the prolific kid. I'll paint you. Give me another one. Us brave. One day I got a whole bunch of signs in. Somebody saw them in my front yard. I handed a sign to somebody, and that started this chain reaction of people seeing somebody walking up the street with a sign, pulling their car over, and getting a sign. There became a long line, so for 4 hours in the street, we just handed out 700 signs. The buses would stop. Kids would run onto the bus, and they'd be like, give me 2 signs, put me on a bus. And people just sort of accepted that this was happening. Nobody honked their horns. It would just be the next car. And we didn't plan it, but what happened is the kids were so used to being able to make stuff at the art house that they started taking the signs and making their own version of them on the backs of the signs. They would appropriate the sign. So, thank you all so much for listening. Does anybody have any questions? I'll give you 7 seconds. That's how long they say to hit your brain and decide. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you all for, thanks. Hey, it's Striped Shirt. What's your name?
Elizabeth,
What's up, Elizabeth?
not too much. Thank you for sharing. So obviously you're here traveling. So
Say that again?
you're here traveling away from home.
I am here.
Yes.
I did travel to get here.
How much time do you spend away from this home that you created? And
So-
how does that affect?
Well, I own the house now. There's an artist in residence who lives upstairs. But mind you, it's not my space. I own the building, but I'm not like all like muscled up on ownership or possession. Unless it is possession of spirit, right? Or to be possessed by like an idea or something. I'm not all up. I'm like, this is mine and that's yours, you stay there. So the house really works in a very organic, communal way, right? So if the front door is open, you can come into the house. And the kids have taken like complete ownership of the house. So if you come into the house, we had an open house once and I asked kids to give tours, but so now they don't stop. So whenever the house is open, it'd be like, have you been here before? Let me show you now. I'll give you a tour. And they always point out what they made. Because the walls are like covered in art. I made this, as though you could ignore all the other stuff that's covered in the walls. And so the house is owned by the neighborhood, and it's really like owned by the kids. It's owned by people. So other people have keys. So today my assistant opened it. The artist in residence is upstairs. But mind you, what also you should understand is it's not a teaching space. It's what I call an even space, where we are all at the same even human level. The house is filled with materials. Nobody ever pays to come in. Nobody ever pays for snacks. The way it works out is my friends who have Costco cards, we go to Costco every once in a while, and I buy a whole bunch of snacks. And it's not an expensive thing. I own the house outright. There's no mortgage. The utilities are nominal. Art supplies come for free because so many people used to like to make art, and now they got a whole bunch of stuff, and so they'd be like, give it to the archive. So we have a lot of supplies, and so you can come in. And so what also started to happen is kids will be like, what do you want to make today? You need to make a decision. And they'll still do that. And so there are no teachers and there are no students, but there are really active and clear moments of inspiration. So I have friends around me who be like, I want to come and teach crochet. I was like, well, you know, it's not really a teaching space because kids come and go. They come and they'll stay for as long as the house is open. They ask me other times, can you just open the house for me? But what will happen is they'll see something new and they'll want to do it. You know, or an adult will see a kid doing something and be like, how do you do that? And the kids will teach and they show and they share and they do it as clearly, but it's relationship based. So my friend wants to come in and teach crochet. So what she does is she comes in and she crochets. She just does the thing itself. She's not like, everybody sit down and be quiet, I'm about to give you a 4-point lesson. No, she sits down and she does it. And the kid sits next to her and says, what are you doing? Can you show me how to do that? Can I make my own? Sure, I brought extra needles with me. I have yarn, this is what we're gonna do today. That's what happens. So there are moments of inspiration, and the kid isn't like waiting for a week to be like, hey, I want to crochet too. They can say right on the spot. Or, a lot of times what happens is sometimes their parents come with them, or like my friends who are artists come over, and it just feels good to be there. Like I have friends who are like major artists, and they come and they do stuff, and they're like, it just feels good. Like I don't know necessarily why. It just feels good here. And I'm like, I know, isn't it nuts that something so simple feels like this? So my assistant opens it, other artists come, and it's consistent. So actually, when there's new people, it's when the kids are like, let me give you a tour, let me do this whole thing. Would you like to make this? Would you like to finish this? And tomorrow, the artist in residence will open. And her friend will come. And there are some parents who just come with their kids all the time. And it's a thing. And we take care of each other. We look out for each other. We make sure that everybody gets pizza. It's just how it is. It feels different than other parts of the world. I have to honestly say that it feels, sometimes I'm in the house and I'm like, I can't believe that just happened. I can't believe that, like when we were at the house once, and it was one of the first nice days, and we were outside, and one of the boys was like, Miss Vanessa, he could kill us, because there had been 2 murders. I was a witness in this homicide trial, his mom was, but he had been standing at the door and saw the same murder. He was so petrified, and one of the other kids said, don't say that out loud. And I said, well, does telling somebody not to say something out loud make them not want to say it? And she was like, no, that doesn't really work. And she's like, what are we supposed to do? And I said, well, I make art with a lot of things, but he still is upset when he points out, well, it was very hard to see, and he just pointed out all the black men on the street. He said, they could kill us. I was like, they're not gonna kill us. And how do you know? And I said, because we're taking care of each other. And then the other kids just started saying, yeah, we're taking care of each other. We're watching each other. And here, it's okay to say that. And then something blew my mind. I'm sitting and I'm making, because this is not a teaching space, like I'm making something, if I paint a portrait, they're like, how do I make a face? And we can talk about how you make a face. And they start lining up in front of me and telling me the stories of the things that they were afraid of, and it was all like nobody's talking to them about death. And I was like, so I had to ask my friend who's a therapist for children, I was like, kids are saying these things to me, what should I do? And she goes, what are you doing? I was like, I'm listening. She's like, well, do that, and then if these other things happen, And so they would line up and they'd be like, this is what it was like to see his body. It was like this, and then I dreamed of a red bed, and what should I do? And I said, well, I make art with the things that I think and the things that I feel. Sometimes I just think about them, or I feel them while I'm making something, and I see what the feeling looks like. And they would sort of take turns, and sometimes they would get impatient and be like, you had your turn. You had enough of a turn. It's my turn. And somebody else would say, he gets to take as much of a turn as he wants. And I was like, what's happening? This is so weird. They literally lined up single file. And somebody would go and come in and say, when he died, it was like this. And why did they cut his hair like this in the casket? He didn't wear his hair like that. We would sort of do this thing. It was different. Does anybody else have a question? I know we've been here for a long time. Hi.
I don't have a question. I just want to say how fantastic this idea of yours of making spectacles of joy. I just think that's an amazing idea. Most people walk around so full of anxieties and fears and all kinds of things like that. So the notion of like consciously going out and just making a spectacle of joy so that other people can see it and somebody else will take something away from it. I think it's just an amazing idea.
I think it's a very human thing. It's what happens when people are standing in a group and they all start laughing. And you can't not get a group of people laughing. Have you noticed that? And it's also what happens if like you're standing in a group and one person starts to sing. And there are it actually is a very natural thing. Like joy is an infectious sight. You know, it's like how sometimes you watch somebody sing and they can't really sing, but you know how they feel when they're singing, and you feel that too. But one of the things that I feel about love is that you then, if you see that and you know it, then you think about it intentionally. And if there's work to be done in the world, then you use that love and that knowledge that their joy is a spectacle and it's infectious as a tool to do the work with as much soul as you can, right? And so from a place where, you know, sometimes it's just like, I think about food and music and what happens when you put food outside and play music. And then if you leave art supplies outside. Like for real, it's like this simple thing. So there, I'm not I don't do I don't contrive a whole lot. I don't do a lot of engineering. I think simple, one, because I'm also really busy and I'm in the studio most of the time, so I'm like, simple joy. Turn the music up, let's dance. And so the kids invented having talent shows at the end of every art house. And they're the most uncompetitive talent shows, and really they just want to have this moment where like, I made up a song! And then me and some of the mothers be like, we're going to freestyle. And so we all like freestyle this goodbye song at the end of our house. Anybody else have another question?
Mine is pretty quick.
My answers never are.
Your cycle, live, love, work.
Uh-huh.
You're so intentional in many things. Why did you put a period after each of those words? Because it stops you.
It might stop you, but it doesn't stop me.
Okay.
I use periods as breaths. So when I write, even in poems, it looks like, oh, English teachers can't stand it. Because it looks like I am like a grammatical idiot. But I try to write it the way that I feel it. So when I see that, I say love, like it's present, like it steps forward, live, present. So the period is like almost also like choreography, and it's like people would walk on the stage. You know? So that's what it feels like to me. Anybody else? Now it's time. Thank you all.